Montana Territory, 1868. The endless sky stretched above the frontier town of Willow Creek like a vast ocean, endless and unforgiving as the plains themselves. 22-year-old Tabitha Byrne stepped off the dusty stagecoach, her emerald green traveling dress already coated with the fine prairie dust. Her honey blonde hair, partially escaping its pins after the long journey, caught the late afternoon sun as she surveyed the single dirt road lined with weathered wooden buildings. "Last stop, miss," the driver called down, tossing her modest carpetbag beside her. Willow Creek. Tabitha squared her shoulders, adjusting the small Derringer pistol hidden in her pocket. The frontier was no place for weakness. 5 towns in 8 months, each one a temporary shelter before the shadows of her past caught up. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, not when it had already cost her everything once before. She had learned through bitter experience that people only brought pain and betrayal. Better to keep moving, stay ahead of the past that hunted her like a wolf on a blood trail. The boarding house at the end of the street looked respectable enough. Whitewashed walls, curtained windows, and a painted sign swinging in the breeze. Tabitha approached the proprietress, a stern-faced woman who barely glanced up from her ledger. "Room for 1 week," Tabitha said, placing coins on the counter. "I prefer privacy." "Don't we all?" the woman replied, sliding a key across the worn wood. "Second floor, last door on the right. Supper at 6 sharp." That night, as Tabitha sat alone in the sparse dining room, she calculated how long she could stretch her dwindling funds. 2 weeks, maybe 3 if she found work. Then she'd move on again, following her cardinal rule: never stay long enough to be remembered. "This town is just another stop," she whispered to herself, for pushing around food she barely tasted. Nothing more. Across town, 24-year-old Quinn Lawson counted the day's earnings at his small livery stable. 3 years of saving, building, and proving himself had earned him respect in Willow Creek. Unlike the older ranchers with their sprawling cattle operations, Quinn had started with nothing but the skills his father had taught him before consumption took him. Now he had a modest but growing business, a reputation for fair dealing, and plans for something more. "Last customer paid," he told his young assistant, sliding the ledger into the desk drawer. "We'll start on that new corral tomorrow." Quinn's lean frame cast a long shadow as he stepped into the twilight. Clean-shaven except for a day's worth of stubble, with earnest blue eyes that matched the Montana sky, he looked younger than his years. But the calluses on his hands and the quiet confidence in his step told of a man who knew his worth. As he walked toward his small cabin at the edge of town, Quinn tipped his hat to familiar faces. Unlike many frontier settlements, Willow Creek was building something stable. Families putting down roots, businesses growing, even talk of a proper school by year's end. Quinn believed in that future. He'd seen too many drifters and cowboys chase fortune and adventure across the territories, ending up with nothing but stories and regrets. "Evening, Mrs. Patterson," he called to the baker's wife. "Tell your husband I'll be by tomorrow about that wagon wheel." He didn't see the stagecoach's arrival or notice the new face at the boarding house. Tomorrow would bring that collision, one that would challenge everything he believed about building a life in one place and everything she believed about the necessity of running. The incident came at dawn. Tabitha had risen early, hoping to scout the town without drawing attention. The livery stable caught her eye. Potential employment meant stretching her funds further. She approached the open doors, watching as a man worked with a spirited bay mare in the corral. The horse reared suddenly, breaking free and bolting straight toward Tabitha. Before she could move, the animal slammed into her, sending her sprawling into the dirt. Pain shot through her ankle as she tried to stand. "Don't move," a voice commanded, and then the owner of that voice was kneeling beside her, a young cowboy with concerned blue eyes. "That mare's got a wild streak. Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," Tabitha insisted, trying to stand again and failing. "I don't need help." "Your ankle suggests otherwise," the man replied, offering his hand. "Quinn Lawson. This is my stable." "Tabitha Byrne," she answered reluctantly, accepting his assistance only because standing alone seemed impossible. "I was actually coming to ask about work." Quinn's eyebrows rose. "Work? Here. I'm good with horses," she said defensively. "Better than you, apparently, if your animals are running loose." To her surprise, Quinn laughed, a warm sound that seemed out of place in her world of constant vigilance. Fair point, Miss Byrne. Though in my defense, that particular mayor has unseated 3 experienced cowboys this month alone. He helped her to a bale of hay and examined her ankle with professional detachment. Not broken, but you won't be walking far today. I can take you back to wherever you're staying. The boarding house, she said reluctantly. Mrs. Hatcher's place? That's clear across town. He stood, decision made. I'll hitch the wagon. As Quinn lifted her into the wagon bed, Tabitha felt a strange discomfort, not from his touch, which was respectfully minimal, but from the simple kindness. Kindness complicated things. Kindness created connections. Connections meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant danger. About that job, Quinn said as he guided the horses down the main street. I could use help with the books and customers. Not glamorous work, but steady pay. Tabitha studied him cautiously. Why would you offer employment to someone you just met? Someone who could be anyone. Quinn's expression remained open. Willow Creek's growing. Good help is scarce. And frankly, anyone who stands their ground when Tempest charges has nerve I can appreciate. Her silence prompted him to continue. Trial basis. 1 week. If it doesn't work out, no harm done. Against her better judgment, Tabitha nodded. 1 week. That afternoon, with her ankle wrapped and elevated on a stool, Tabitha began organizing Quinn's chaotic ledger. His business was doing better than his bookkeeping suggested. If properly accounted, he was turning a respectable profit. You're undercharging the Hendersons, she noted as Quinn returned from shoeing a plow horse. Their farm had a bad year, he replied, washing his hands in the basin. They'll make it up when the harvest comes in. Charity is bad business, Tabitha said flatly. You can't build anything sustainable on goodwill. Quinn dried his hands on a worn towel. Depends on what you're building. I'm not just after money. What then? A place. A future. He gestured around the stable. Something that lasts. Tabitha kept her expression neutral despite the sharp pang those words triggered. A future. As if such things were guaranteed to anyone. As if the world didn't snatch away certainties with cruel randomness. Nothing lasts, she said quietly, returning to the ledger. The first week stretched into a second. Tabitha's ankle healed, but she continued working at the livery, telling herself it was practical, good money, minimal interaction with townspeople, and Quinn respected her reserve. If he was curious about her past, he didn't press. Their rhythm developed naturally. Mornings, she managed the office while he handled the physical labor. Afternoons, when business slowed, she sometimes helped with the gentler horses, revealing an expertise that clearly impressed him. Evenings, he would walk her back to the boarding house, their conversations gradually extending beyond business. You know horses like you were born to them, Quinn observed one afternoon as she calmed a nervous colt. Where did you learn? The question skated dangerous territory, but Tabitha offered a partial truth. My father raised quarter horses in Pennsylvania. I grew up in stables like this. Pennsylvania's a long way from Montana territory. Everything's a long way from somewhere else, she replied, deflecting further inquiry. 2 days later, a freight wagon brought supplies and mail to Willow Creek. Quinn returned from town with parcels for the livery and a newspaper. Thought you might like some reading, he said, handing her the paper. Not much news reaches us out here. Tabitha thanked him absently, but as she unfolded the pages later that evening, her blood froze. There, on the 3rd page, was a notice she dreaded. Information sought regarding the whereabouts of Tabitha Byrne, formerly of Harrisburg, in connection with the death of prominent businessman Victor Ramsey. Her hands trembled as she burned the paper in the boarding house stove that night. 3 weeks in one place had been too long. She would leave tomorrow, before Quinn or anyone else connected her to the story. But dawn brought unexpected complications. As Tabitha approached the livery, bags packed at the boarding house and stage ticket purchased, she heard raised voices from inside. Last warning, Lawson. The speaker was a thick-set man flanked by 2 rough-looking companions. Mr. Crawford doesn't appreciate competition. Sell now while the offer stands. I've given my answer, Decker. Quinn's voice remained calm despite the obvious threat. This property isn't for sale. Accidents happen in businesses like these, Decker replied. Fires. Spooked horses. Damaged reputations. Tabitha stepped back into the shadows, but not quickly enough. Decker spotted her. Your pretty assistant might want to consider her future in this town, too. he said with an ugly smile. Shame if something happened to her. The men pushed past her, Deckard deliberately bumping her shoulder. Quinn emerged from the stable, jaw tight with anger. Who were they? Tabitha asked, though she recognized the tactics all too well. Hank Crawford's men. He owns half the businesses in the county and wants the rest. Quinn ran a hand through his hair. He's been trying to buy me out since I started turning a profit. And you refused? This place is mine. I built it. His eyes met hers. Some things are worth fighting for. The conviction in his voice stirred something in Tabitha. Admiration, certainly, but also a distant memory of her own determination before fear became her constant companion. What will you do? Keep working. Keep building. Quinn managed a smile. Speaking of which, Johnson's bringing his draft horses at noon. Tabitha hesitated, her escape plans suddenly complicated by a reluctance she hadn't anticipated. Quinn, I may need to leave town soon. His expression fell slightly, though he quickly masked it. Another position? Just moving on. She couldn't meet his gaze. It's what I do. Well, he said after a moment. Until then, I could use your help with those draft horses. That afternoon, as they worked together, Tabitha found herself studying Quinn with new awareness. His patience with difficult animals, his easy laugh with customers, the way he spoke of future plans with such certainty, all contradicted her belief that attachment was dangerous. Here was someone building something permanent in an impermanent world, someone who saw value in staying when everything in her experience screamed to run. When thunder rolled in that evening, bringing a summer downpour, Quinn insisted on driving her to the boarding house rather than letting her walk through the deluge. I've weathered worse than rain, she protested as they huddled under the livery's overhang. Doesn't mean you should have to, he replied, hitching the wagon with practiced efficiency. The rain intensified during their journey, transforming Willow Creek's main street into a river of mud. They arrived at the boarding house drenched despite the wagon's canvas cover. Mrs. Hatcher met them at the door, her perpetual frown deepening. Kitchen's closed, but there's leftover stew if you're hungry, Mr. Lawson. Can't have you riding back in this. The simple meal in the empty dining room created an unexpected intimacy. Quinn spoke of his childhood in Missouri, his father's death, his journey west. Each story revealed a man who had faced loss, yet remained open to possibility. What about you? He asked gently. What brings a woman with your skills all the way to Montana territory alone? Tabitha stared into her bowl. Nothing worth telling. I doubt that. Quinn's voice held no judgment. But I respect your privacy. Their eyes met across the table, and for a dangerous moment, Tabitha felt the walls she'd built beginning to crack. This man, with his quiet strength and unfailing decency, made her want to believe in things she'd abandoned: trust, honesty, perhaps even a future in one place. It's complicated, she finally said, and not entirely respectable. Few journeys out here are. Quinn's smile was gentle. We all carry something, Tabitha. The rain continued late into the night. In her small room, Tabitha made her decision. She would leave on tomorrow's stage, before these fragile feelings strengthened further, before Quinn discovered the truth, before Crawford's men made good on their threats. She would disappear as she had before, protecting herself, and now, protecting him too. But morning brought shocking news that shattered her plans. Tabitha arrived at the livery to find it surrounded by townspeople. Quinn stood in the doorway, his face ashen. What happened? She asked, pushing through the crowd. Inside, the devastation was obvious. Someone had broken in during the night, destroying equipment, vandalizing the office, and worst of all, opening the stalls. Most of the horses had been recovered, but Tempest, the valuable bay mare, was missing. Crawford's men, Quinn said grimly. Can't prove it, but everyone knows. The sheriff, a weathered man named Harris, shook his head. Without evidence, my hands are tied. Could have been drifters passing through. As the crowd dispersed, Quinn surveyed the damage with quiet despair. 3 years of work. I can rebuild the stalls, replace the equipment, but Tempest. His voice faltered. She was worth more than everything else combined. Tabitha felt cold certainty settle in her chest. I'm going to help you find her. Quinn looked up, surprised. You're staying? For now, she said, already formulating a plan. I know something about tracking valuable horses. They set out within the hour, following hoofprints that led northwest from town. Quinn's knowledge of the local terrain complemented Tabitha's unexpected tracking skills. As they rode, his curiosity finally overcame his restraint. Where does a livery bookkeeper learn to track like this? Tabitha hesitated, then offered another piece of her past. After my father died, I worked for a horse trader. Not all his business was legitimate. You helped steal horses? Quinn's tone held surprise, but not condemnation. I helped recover horses that were stolen, she corrected. But yes, I've operated outside the law when necessary. By nightfall, they had tracked the mare to a remote cabin in the foothills. Two men, Crawford's thugs, had corralled Tempest behind a crude fence. Watching from the tree line, Quinn and Tabitha formulated their plan. We should return to town, bring the sheriff, Quinn said, and give them time to move her, or claim they found her wandering. Tabitha shook her head. We take her now, while they're sleeping. Quinn studied her face in the fading light. This isn't your fight, Tabitha. I'm making it mine, she replied, surprised by her own conviction. Under cover of darkness, they approached the cabin. Tabitha's expertise at silent movement proved invaluable as they cut the corral fence and led Tempest away. They were nearly clear when a shout from the cabin shattered the night. Riders, Quinn warned as lanterns flared behind them. They mounted quickly, Quinn on his gelding, Tabitha on Tempest, and raced into the darkness with Crawford's men in pursuit. The chase continued through unfamiliar territory until Quinn veered suddenly onto a narrow path. There's a crossing ahead, he called. The creek's running high with the rain, but it's our only chance. Tabitha felt Tempest tense beneath her as they approached the swollen creek. The mare gathered herself, then launched across the rushing water in a magnificent leap. Quinn's gelding followed, barely making the far bank. Behind them, their pursuers halted, unwilling to risk the crossing in darkness. They didn't slow until they reached Quinn's small cabin on the outskirts of Willow Creek. Both drenched and exhausted, they unsaddled the horses and led them into the lean-to beside the cabin. We did it, Quinn said, his face transformed by exhilaration and something more, admiration. You were incredible. The intensity of his gaze sent warmth cascading through Tabitha despite her wet clothes. She looked away first. We should report this to the sheriff in the morning. Agreed. But tonight, you need dry clothes and rest. Quinn unlocked his cabin. It's not much, but there's a fire and clean clothes you can borrow. The cabin was indeed small, one room with a stove, bed, table, and few personal belongings. Yet it felt more like a home than anywhere Tabitha had stayed in years. While Quinn built a fire, she noticed the books stacked neatly on a shelf, histories, agriculture manuals, and a volume of poetry that seemed incongruous for a frontier horseman. He caught her looking and smiled. My mother's. She believed education shouldn't end with schooling. She sounds wise, Tabitha said, accepting the clean shirt and trousers he offered. She would have liked you too. Determined women always got her respect. Quinn turned his back gallantly. I'll step outside while you change. When he returned, she was seated by the fire in his two large clothes, her wet dress and petticoats hanging from a chair to dry. The domestic scene struck them both with its unexpected intimacy. Quinn cleared his throat. I should check the horses once more. Left alone, Tabitha found herself examining the small details of his life. The carefully mended clothes, the plans for an expanded stable drawn in precise detail, the photograph of a smiling couple she assumed were his parents. This was a life built with purpose and care. A life with roots. When Quinn returned, they sat before the fire drinking coffee, the night's adventures creating a bridge over the careful distance they'd maintained. Thank you, Quinn said quietly. Not many would have risked themselves for someone else's property. You would have, she replied. You do it every day for this town, carrying credit, helping when needed. What? Quinn considered her question seriously. Because a community is only as strong as what we do for each other. My father taught me that worth isn't measured in what you take, but in what you build and leave behind. His words settled in the space between them, challenging Tabitha's years of carefully constructed independence. What had she built? What would she leave behind besides fading memories in towns she'd passed through? What are you running from, Tabitha? Quinn asked gently. The question hung in the air, dangerous in its simplicity. Tabitha stared into the fire, weighing risk against a sudden, powerful desire to be known, truly known, by this man. "A murder I didn't commit," she finally said, the words falling like stones into still water. "But one I was blamed for." Quinn remained silent, allowing her to continue at her own pace. "Victor Ramsey was a businessman in Harrisburg. Powerful, respected. He was also my father's partner." Her voice hardened. "After my father died, Ramsey offered to help manage our affairs. I was 19, alone, naive. I didn't realize he was systematically stealing everything my father had built." The fire crackled as she continued. "When I discovered the truth and confronted him, he threatened me. Said no one would believe a girl over a man of his standing. That night, someone shot him in his office. I found the body, my father's pistol beside it." "You were framed?" Quinn said, understanding immediately. "The evidence was circumstantial, but damning. I fled before they could arrest me." Tabitha met his gaze directly. "I've been running ever since. 3 years, always looking over my shoulder." Quinn processed this revelation. "Have you considered fighting to clear your name? With what resources? Against who? I never saw who planted the gun." Tabitha shook her head. "Running was the only option. Until you can't run anymore," Quinn said softly. The truth of his words settled between them. Eventually, exhaustion overtook them. Quinn insisted she take the bed while he slept on a bedroll near the stove. Despite her protests, Tabitha found herself grateful for the simple comfort. Morning arrived with a pounding on the door. Sheriff Harris stood on the porch, his expression grave. "Crawford's men filed charges," he announced without preamble. "Claim you stole a horse from their property last night." Quinn began to explain, but the sheriff raised his hand. "That's not all. Got a wire from back east." His eyes shifted to Tabitha. "Seems Miss Byrne here is wanted for questioning in Pennsylvania. Murder charge." The world seemed to tilt beneath Tabitha's feet. This was her nightmare realized. Discovery, accusation, no escape. "She's innocent," Quinn said firmly, stepping slightly in front of her. "And she was with me last night, recovering a horse that was stolen from my stable." "That's for a judge to decide," Harris replied, though his expression suggested he wasn't entirely unsympathetic. "Miss Byrne, I need you to come with me." "And if I refuse?" she asked, calculating the distance to the horses. "Don't," Quinn said quietly. "Running confirms guilt in everyone's eyes." His certainty steadied her. "What happens now?" "You'll stay in the town jail until the circuit judge arrives next week," Harris explained. "Crawford's pressing hard for immediate resolution. Wants to make an example." As they walked toward town, Quinn beside her despite Harris's objections, Tabitha felt strangely calm. Perhaps this was inevitable. Perhaps one couldn't outrun fate forever. The Willow Creek jail was small but clean, 2 cells in the back of the sheriff's office. Harris locked Tabitha in the farther one, awkwardly apologetic. "I'll bring meals from the hotel," he offered. "And, see if Mrs. Patterson has some proper women's clothes to lend you." Left alone, Tabitha sat on the narrow cot, the reality of her situation sinking in. The Pennsylvania charges would ensure she never walked free again, regardless of Crawford's local vendetta. Everything she feared had come to pass. Quinn visited that afternoon, his face lined with worry but his voice steady. "I've telegraphed a lawyer in Helena," he said, "and I'm gathering statements from everyone who saw the damage to my stable." "Why?" Tabitha asked. "Why fight for someone you barely know? Someone with my past?" Quinn's expression softened. "Because I know enough. I know you're honorable, brave, and skilled. I know you helped me when you could have run. And I know what it's like to be alone against forces that seem insurmountable." He reached through the bars, his hand open in invitation. After a moment's hesitation, Tabitha placed her hand in his. "I'm not giving up," he promised. "Neither should you." The week before the judge's arrival transformed Willow Creek. The town divided between Crawford's supporters and those who stood with Quinn. The story of Tabitha's Eastern troubles spread, but rather than universal condemnation, it sparked debate. Many frontier settlers had their own complicated pasts. Some understood running from unjust accusations. Mrs. Patterson brought fresh bread daily. The blacksmith's wife delivered clean dresses. Even Mrs. Hatcher visited, gruffly informing Tabitha her room remained available whenever this nonsense is sorted. Each night, Quinn came with news of his efforts. He had located witnesses who had seen Crawford's men near the livery the night of the vandalism. He had gathered character testimonials from customers Tabitha had helped. Most surprisingly, He had contacted authorities in Pennsylvania, seeking details of the original investigation. Why risk so much? Tabitha asked him on the sixth night, their hands linked across the iron bars that separated them. Your reputation, your business. Crawford could destroy everything you've built. Quinn's answer came without hesitation. Because some things matter more than safety or security. Some people are worth fighting for. His words pierced the armor around her heart. For 3 years, she had believed herself alone against the world, had convinced herself that connections were liabilities. Yet here was someone willing to stand beside her against both frontier justice and her past. I'm afraid, she admitted, the confession feeling like surrender and liberation simultaneously. Not of jail, but of hoping again. Quinn's fingers tightened around hers. Hope is the bravest thing we do out here. The circuit judge arrived on a Tuesday, a stern-faced man named Judge Marshall with a reputation for fairness. The makeshift court was established in the town hall, with what seemed like all of Willow Creek in attendance. Crawford's charges were heard first. His men testified that Quinn and Tabitha had trespassed and stolen a valuable horse from their legitimate possession. Quinn countered with evidence of the stable vandalism and witnesses who had seen Tempest in his corral the day before the attack. When Tabitha's turn came to speak, she stood with unexpected steadiness. 3 years of running had taught her to hide, to deflect, to present only what others expected to see. But Quinn's unwavering support had awakened something she thought long dead, the courage to face what came, regardless of outcome. The mare belonged to Mr. Lawson, she testified clearly. We recovered stolen property, nothing more. Crawford himself took the stand next, his expensive suit and confident manner designed to impress. Miss Byrne is a criminal from the East, he declared. A murderer fleeing justice who found protection with Lawson. Their theft was just the latest in her pattern of lawlessness. Judge Marshall's expression revealed nothing as he called for the final statements. Quinn had retained a young lawyer named Matthews who presented a passionate defense of both the horse recovery and Tabitha's character. But it was Quinn himself who delivered the most damaging blow to Crawford's case. Your Honor, he said, producing a telegram. I've received confirmation from the authorities in Harrisburg. The investigation into Victor Ramsey's death was reopened last month after new evidence emerged. His business partner, Edward Phillips, has confessed to the murder and to framing Miss Byrne. Gasps filled the courtroom. Tabitha felt the room spin around her as 3 years of running suddenly, impossibly, ended with a single piece of paper. Judge Marshall read the telegram carefully. This appears authentic. The Pennsylvania charges against Miss Byrne are being formally withdrawn. He turned to Crawford, whose face had darkened with fury. As for the local matter, I find no theft occurred. One cannot steal what already belongs to one's employer. Case dismissed. The courtroom erupted in conversation. Tabitha sat immobile, unable to process this sudden reversal of fortune. Freedom, vindication, the possibility of a life without looking over her shoulder. Quinn was beside her instantly, his face alight with joy. It's over, he said, taking her hands. You're free. How? She managed, still struggling to believe. How did you know to contact them? I didn't, he admitted. I was looking for character witnesses from your hometown, anyone who might speak to your reputation. Found a newspaper editor who mentioned the case had been reopened. The timing was providence. Crawford pushed through the crowd, his face contorted with rage. This isn't finished, Lawson. I'll run you out of business for this humiliation. No. Judge Marshall interrupted, overhearing. You won't, Mr. Crawford. Attempted intimidation of a witness is a serious matter. I suggest you return to your business and reconsider your methods. As Crawford stalked out, the townspeople surrounded Tabitha and Quinn with congratulations and support. For the first time since her father's death, Tabitha felt the warmth of community, not as an outsider passing through, but as someone who belonged. That evening, Quinn walked Tabitha back to the boarding house. The summer twilight painted Willow Creek in golden hues, transforming the frontier town into something almost magical. What will you do now? Quinn asked, his voice carefully neutral. Now that you can go anywhere, be anyone. Tabitha stopped, turning to face him fully. The man before her had changed everything, had shown her that safety sometimes meant standing your ground rather than running. That trust could be a strength rather than a weakness. I've been thinking about that, she said. For 3 years, I've been running from what happened. living half a life, always looking backward. Quinn waited. Hope and uncertainty mingled in his expression. I think, Tabitha continued, finding courage in his steadfast presence, that I'd like to try living forward for a change, building something that lasts. Here? In Willow Creek? The question contained another, unspoken one. Yes, if there might be a place for me. She took a deep breath. With you, if that's something you might want. Quinn's smile was like sunrise breaking across the plains, radiant with possibility. I've wanted that since you stood your ground against Tempest on your first day. I just never dared hope you'd stay long enough to hear me say it. His hand rose to gently touch her cheek. I love you, Tabitha Byrne. Your courage, your skill, your heart. I've been building a life here, but it was incomplete until you arrived. I love you too, she whispered, the words unfamiliar but undeniably true. You showed me that running isn't freedom, that sometimes the bravest thing is to stand still and let yourself belong somewhere. To someone. Their kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with the promise of a future neither had dared imagine, one they would build together. 1 year later, the expanded Lawson livery was the finest in 3 counties. Beside it stood a new house, where Quinn and Tabitha Lawson had begun their life as husband and wife. The sign over the business now read, Lawson and Lawson, acknowledging Tabitha's full partnership. On a warm June evening, they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains. Quinn's arm rested comfortably around Tabitha's shoulders, his other hand gently cradled against her growing belly. I never thought I'd have this, Tabitha said softly. A home, a family, a place where I truly belong. Quinn kissed her temple. You were always meant for more than running. You just needed someone to run alongside you until you were ready to stop. As twilight deepened over Willow Creek, Tabitha Lawson felt the last shadows of her past fade into the growing light of her future. A future built on love, trust, and the courage to stay.